Thanks, Becca. Hi, everybody. I'm going to go into gallery view so I can see all your smiling faces. I know a lot of you have your cameras off. I'm going to ask you to turn your cameras on in a second if you have the ability to do so. I'm very fortunate to be with all of you today and our very own Steve Gordon, Joe Xavier, Meredith Williams, John Sanborn, and Stephanie Tom. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciated the recordings that we did. It seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. But really diving into this idea about accelerated innovation as it applies to public service, and want to build off that conversation. A couple things to keep in mind as we get started with our time this morning. The first thing I have to just warn you of is that we have a COVID puppy and he just discovered what birds are. So if you hear a COVID puppy barking in the background, I'll do my best to mute it, but that's part of the dangers of working from home and new coworkers that are in our midst. Since this is a live Q&A session, some new ground rules for our panelists. I'm going to pose some questions. These weren't rehearsed in advance and they weren't shared in advance. So it's very much a conversational style today. And as I pose a question, three different options at your disposal. One, to respond to the question right away. Two, to say, come back to me, call on someone else first. And the last, just to pass all together. So know that you have those three options today. A ground rule for all of our guests today. If there's a question that comes up, feel free to put it into the chat feature. We likely won't get to all of them, but I'll do my best to get to as many as we can over the next 55 minutes or so. The last ground rule is the way that we clap in this Zoom world. And you might think it's by going to the reactions button and clicking the little hand clap that looks like a little golf clap. That's actually not the case. We're going to clap with our neighbors. So if you have the ability to turn on your cameras, turn on your cameras and help me welcome Steve, Meredith, Joe, John, and Stephanie. Get your hands up like this. Clap with your neighbors. Oh, come on. You know, it's fun. Oh, welcome, team. All right, here we go. Steve, one of the things that stood out during your presentation and your remarks earlier this morning was something that is so ingrained within our organizations. And that's when we're in public service, our role is to support the public and strengthen our society in a lot of different ways. You know, what's the case for innovation when it comes to public service, recognizing that so many of the things that we do within public service have been so ingrained over the years, that's just part of who we are. So what's the case for innovation?
Well, I think the basic case for innovation is that, you know, our constituents, they live in the real world. They live outside of state services or county services or federal services. So they're exposed to innovation all the time, and their expectation should be to get that same level of service. If you think about the taxes that are being paid and the services we provide with those taxes and fees, the expectation should be we should be somewhere near the minimum bar, and we need to make sure that our teams understand where that minimum bar is. And what I've tried to do at the DMV, and I see some of my staff are on here as well, so thank you guys for being here, is to not measure ourselves against, you know, other government agencies, but measure ourselves against the best of the best. And to be with the best of the best, you have to innovate. You have to challenge everything that you do and figure out, how do I get that service to the customer? So I think it's very easy to make the case for innovation because we have to innovate to evolve to be world-class. And that should be our goal as government servants, to be world-class and compete with who our customers, our constituents are dealing with every single day, and the non-government actors, the Amazons, the Domino's pizza delivery guys. We need to be as great as those companies are.
Yeah, I love that. It's looking at, you know, just the workforce that we do and the services that we provide, and are we keeping pace with where other technologies might be coming into the mix, Stephanie, which is leading to this question around, you know, how has technology helped us to innovate maybe in a different way than we have in the past?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I love the question, Paul, and even to build off what Steve said, absolutely, we have to innovate. And of course, that involves technology. And before I move on to talk about technology and how that supports us, it really is about the culture as well, and the mindset, and having a growth mindset, and understanding, just as Steve said, is that we must innovate. Now, actually, in my new role, I'm in the legislature, and talk about being very close to constituents, being very close to the customer. And again, they deserve for us to have services and programs that are very innovative, that help them engage civically. And technology, as you mentioned, Paul, it could be a wide range of technology solutions, but we really need to look at technology, the process, and the people, and those three key pillars, because technology is so important. I will also say, of course, when we're talking about technology, I say there's many different platforms, many different types of technology. I think the majority of us, of course, know Microsoft because of Outlook and our email, but there are so many other tools between Slack, so many other tools between Microsoft Teams, which I'm sure some of you are using, some of you might not be using. And of course, that's going to bridge us into maybe a different conversation or a different question, Paul. However, that allows for additional communication and collaboration, which is critical to innovation. So technology, of course, is very important.
Thanks, Stephanie, for recognizing all the different platforms out there, because we just take so many things for granted now because we've been doing it for so long, even in this short time frame, right? It's still ingrained with how we think about the workplace environment. Meredith, when Stephanie started off, she said we must innovate. Is that true? And what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. So I appreciate Stephanie's comments, and I will echo also her appreciation for this opportunity to participate this morning. I couldn't agree more that there's no choice about innovation, whether it's because of the need to compete for, to be an employer of choice and to be attractive to young new staff who want to be in a dynamic organization. And we have to make sure that government is that. I think dollars are hard to come by in government. This is one place where you can be sure you don't have as much budget as you might want. And so as a result, you're going to have to use technology. You're going to have to innovate. In our case, one of the ways that we innovate is we have truly embraced continuous improvement and Lean Six Sigma. We do so many Lean Six Sigma processes, and if we were to add up the savings that we've recognized as a result of our ability to constantly look at our processes and find opportunities to get better and innovate, I would say, number one, it leads to better collaboration across the organization because we use a real team approach for those projects. And number two, it leads to cost savings, which allows us to meet our mission better, bring new tools to bear on our problems. So innovation, we're really working hard to build it into the culture and to make sure people feel comfortable bringing up harebrained ideas so that we can explore them, because who knows what might be disruptive in terms of getting us to think about things in new and different ways.
Yeah, I love that, Meredith. And Joe, what I've heard so far is almost linking innovation to technology. Is that always the case? And how has it looked from your perspective as a director of DOR?
I want to go back to, well, first of all, just good morning to everyone. And like everybody else, really happy to be here to contribute to the conversation. I want to go back to something that Stephanie said, which is it's a mindset. I think a lot of times when we think of innovation, we think of, the big ticket items like the iPhone or some of these other splashy things that we all fall in love with and just really need. But a lot of the innovation really is a shift in how you think about things. And it's an innovation in looking for opportunities that are in front of us the whole darn time, and we just don't recognize them. So as an example, COVID, telework. COVID made it very clear that we needed to. And so here, look at all of us here on this virtual forum, 300 plus people. If this was face-to-face, we wouldn't have 300 people participating. We wouldn't have the benefit of all of you from around the state joining and participating in this. What did this take? Yeah, it took technology. Yeah, it took rethinking how we looked at the issue at hand. And it took saying, hey, there is a different way. So a lot of times these innovations come as a result of a major disruption, a major force. But in every time, in my opinion, they're driven by the person who looks at it and sees a different way to do the same thing. The other thing that I would lift up here is, some of you by now are saying, yeah, this is all sounding really nice, but don't forget we have all these rules that we need to follow, and we have all these systems that can't be challenged. I don't agree with you. If you look closely at the rules, and you look closely at the systems in place, there is amazing flexibility in it when you get past what people believe is necessary versus what's actually required by each of the systems and the rules.
Hey, Paul, can I chime in really quick?
Please do.
Thank you. So Joe, I appreciate your words as well. And it just kind of made me think of why I was talking about the mindset. And there's two things that I wanted to share. First of all, I talked about mindset because for those who are familiar with my background, I actually come from the private sector. And I'll be honest, I was one of those, right? I would say, this is what we do in the private sector. And there are models of success. And guess what we do in the private sector? But I'm also one of those that doesn't want to continually criticize until you've actually joined the ranks. And so many people had said to me, this is so great. We need more people from the private sector. This is so great. And so then when I would actually put forth an idea or a vision, there was hesitancy. It was like, oh, well, this is state service, or oh, well, it's bureaucratic. And so that's where I'm talking about a mindset, because it's important just to be open to the idea. And I get that there's systemic bureaucracy. I get there's other things. However, collectively, which is, of course, why we're having this session, if we have an open mindset and we're willing to learn about models of success from other sectors, even within our own, absolutely, I think we can make that change. And so that's why I wanted to share as far as where the mindset and the growth mindset came from.
Stephanie, I love that. And I actually want to revisit the idea about the mindset and also the interaction with our colleagues. John, I want to call on you. You've been doing innovation before innovation was cool. How do you think about innovation in the work that you do, particularly the evolution of different techniques that have been utilized over the last, say, 5-10 years?
Yeah, I'll start off. Steve Gordon mentioned something around innovation and how we engage with our employees and to a certain degree, our customers, and being a part of an innovation program and learning development in a Fortune 1 company. It was really interesting in the technology that was available and how we can engage with employees and with those that we serve. One of the big things that we saw occurring is while the technology was available and we could rapidly evolve in our business, the customers weren't necessarily ready for that. Some were, some weren't. So being able to give our staff the tools to be able to develop and to take on those new innovations and those tools within their organization, but also being able to work with our customers, engage with them and give them the tools. And what we also found was the choice on how to engage with our services really was key for us, in order for us to be successful, and I want to move away from the metaphor that I used in the video around drivers and mechanics, because I think we can all appreciate a little more candor in this conversation. There has been a forced workplace evolution for our entire world, and something that would have happened in 10 years was jam-packed in the past couple of years. Think of how many times in the past year that you've gone inside of a bank or went to a restaurant or spent an hour shopping inside of a store just to shop. Like, you've changed. Now think of the people who work in the banks or serve large tables at restaurants, or how shops have had to engage customers now outside of a 6-foot bubble. Those workers have changed. I'm telling you, like, how we do our work has permanently changed, just as much as what people expect of us has changed. Was being asked of us for us to get really good at the things that we haven't been doing 3 or 5, 10, 20 years ago. We have to adapt to the world around us and find out how to leverage our talent to better serve our customers now and in the future.
Hey, Paul, can I make one comment to John's comment? I've had the luxury in this job of visiting, all parts of the state. And I was recently in Brawley, California. And for those of you that haven't found Brawley on the map recently, it's the southeast corner. It's in the middle of the Imperial Valley, and it's not a very big town. But our site manager there, reminded me again to never underestimate people. And she was talking about the people in her community. If you looked at this speck on the map, you would say, well, maybe they're not on the internet, maybe they don't have this capability, maybe there's not this, maybe there's not that. But to John's point is that we've all learned a bunch of new skills, and that the technology reaches much further than it's ever reached. We have these mobile devices now that have the internet on them, and they really do change the calculus for us as we learn about our customers and we think about how we can extend our reach. Doesn't work for everyone, but we should just remember that as we teach our staff and we learn and challenge convention, that we should not underestimate how able people really are today.
I appreciate that, and getting back into that nimbleness that we all need. John, to your point about how we're all tossed into this 2 years ago, that might be true, but in many ways we've been teeing up for at least 3 decades of this idea around teleworking. And we can think back to what Los Angeles was facing at the time in the late 90s of how do we control the smog that's happening within the county, the city limits. How do we reduce it, and seeing telework as one possible way to be able to combat it. Now, we never really dove into it full force or with our entire heart until COVID hit and said, hey, we have the tools, resources available to us. Now let's just jump in and do it. Meredith, question for you. When we think about that side of the house, right, we can talk about innovation on being able to tie all these systems together. What do we need to do to get ready to innovate?
Well, this again, Stephanie used the mindset. And I think we need to, there has to be an acceptance generally, take the technology out of it. The change is inevitable. I mean, that's the one thing. And so in order to be able to handle change, you have to have an organization that has some good communications practices. Whether that's a supervisor having a good interaction with the direct report staff, so that they know where the pain points are, where people are struggling, and can help them not only walk through it, but convey that up so that, the people who can help respond to their needs are in a position to do so. So you have to have kind of, I was told there was an African proverb about, in order to eat, you must open your mouth. And there's this idea that you have to be ready to handle these disruptions. And that means taking people where they are, helping move them along at whatever rate that you can, giving people tools, training and investing in our staff. I would say that's one area where we've, sometimes we're penny wise and pound foolish. Investing in our staff really can help them get ready, help them keep up on current trends. We're a very science-based organization. How do you make sure that our technical staff are able to keep up on the latest and greatest findings in science, whether that's toxicology or geology or whatever that is. So there again, and it becomes that organizational mindset that we are dynamic, that we communicate, that we adapt. But it is uncomfortable for folks. Getting to the point, for instance, where we've been able to talk about racial issues, that's still a process that's ongoing, but you have to keep going at it, take that step back. What's worked, what doesn't work, where are the pain points, how can we continue to evolve? And so that's the kinds of things that we're endeavoring to do. And I will just give a shout out to my entire executive leadership team, because they've really dug in, and it's a team effort to try to create that environment for our staff.
Hey, Paul, could I add a piece here? I really appreciate what Meredith is saying when we're looking at people. And the piece I want to add is, a lot of times we assume people don't want to. And there are people who may not want to, but there's also a slice of the individuals that we're working with and engaging with that may really not know how, and may truly not have had access to some of just maybe even the technology to really have developed that skill set and that competence that they need to function in this new work environment that John has spoken about. I'm sure everybody's been talking about throughout the sessions. So I think the idea that when we look at an individual and we're ascribing they don't want to, just challenge all of us to go look at it and say, is it because they truly don't want to? Or are there other factors at play, including what people's home environments are like, right? Including what access do they have from their home environments or wherever they're being asked to work from. So I just, as leaders, we really have to individualize our thinking to where that person is, and then help close that gap with them so that they can really be part of not just what we're doing today, but what's going to continue to involve what we're doing tomorrow.
Stephanie, as I'm hearing Meredith describe the communication and Joe about this interpersonal relationship, I'm reminded of something that you had said in the earlier recording around this idea of compassion, the role of compassion, of interacting with others. Feed off of the conversation.
Sure. And of course, I was thinking of the exact same thing, and appreciate Joe's words, because that's exactly what I was referring to when I was talking about leading change or being a manager with compassion. We had said it before. Sure, we're talking about a pandemic and pivoting to telework, and then of course we're here. However, when I'm talking about leading about compassion, never forget that work is just one component of an individual's overall life. There are so many other things going on. So one, we can't forget that. Two, we need to be patient, frankly, and actually caring to understand that, just as Joe said, is it really that they don't want to, or that it's a hesitancy? But do we understand the why? And of course, I know Meredith talks about this a lot, but what is the why behind this? And if we really take some time to understand not only our team as a whole, but the team as individuals, I think we'll make much more progress. And of course, for the managers and supervisors that are out there, and I know it comprises the majority of this group, it is that type of management that we need to have as we're moving towards leveraging more technology and moving into being more innovative.
So, John, as we're around this space around, communication and compassion and seeing the different tools and resources that are at our disposal, is this something that we can influence as managers, supervisors, leaders within our organization? And if so, what does it look like?
Yeah. Wow. On what Stephanie was talking about. I really like, this thought process around, being compassionate with our employees. For many of us, being asked to pivot, to learn new skill sets, I think we really need to make sure that we're clear on what we need to be doing or able to do. And if we don't have a clear understanding, we shouldn't be sitting around waiting for our business to develop a 10-point strategic plan accompanied by an award-winning mission statement and a bulletproof governance document. We need to start asking questions to understand frequently and be prepared to move, and understand that movement requires effort and energy by all of us. And for managers, supervisors, those who are asking our people to pivot, like Stephanie said, absolutely be empathetic. Provide your team with that clear direction, as clear as you can make it, and allow them to fail, to experiment, to learn, and to develop. New skills and being uber efficient doesn't happen overnight. We need to be prepared to apply consistent leadership for our folks and continue to provide growth opportunities and teachable moments along the way. And by the way, Paul, don't discount our leaders' needs to develop new skills as well.
Hey, Paul, so I just wanted to jump on something, or just kind of piggyback on what John was saying, and that's actually more to the chat and what Monica was saying. And I love that. Let's go there, right? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how short managers and supervisors need to be compassionate. In addition, that compassion involves providing a safe environment, right? I've been in the executive branch for a few years. I get it. You don't want to make a mistake because someone might write it up on your probe report, right? Someone might talk about it. It puts you in a position where your reputation or the perception of you as an employee is negative. And that needs to change. And I understand, of course, a system in place from an HR perspective. However, we do need to make sure, and I really needed to hone in on this point because she's right on. There's a fear of failure, and we need to make safer spaces. To be more specific, I will say, so for my team in government affairs in the Department of Technology, they know, I would say, what do we need to do? How do we get across the finish line? And I specifically would say, take a risk, I'll own it. I'll go back to our deputies. I'll go back to the team. It'll be my fault. But I need you guys to think in a different way. What do we need to do differently? And they know that I would step up with that because it needed to happen. But and I know it's not so easy in different agencies or different environments, but I just wanted to agree with Monica wholeheartedly. It's something that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah, it totally
And
does.
now-
And Stephanie, what you're describing at the heart of it is what we frame as psychological safety. And as we understand psychological safety, it's a trust factor that comes into play. Meredith.
I'll make it quick. There is a whole concept called safe to fail. Safe to fail projects. How do you design projects that get staff and teams comfortable with taking a risk? They actually think about something they really want to change that could be disruptive, but design a way to implement something that they'll learn from whatever happens, success or failure. This is something that NASA has applied to a lot of their different tools to kind of get back their mojo in terms of innovation and more comfort with risk. And the other thing I'm noticing some of the things in the chat, and it excites me because I see people challenging the existing paradigm. We have to make it comfortable to speak up, to challenge our processes. Our hiring processes are a great example of that. And there are a couple comments about that in the chat.
So, Steve, how do you do that within a public service? Right? When you're talking about the idea around failure, when failure happens within public service, it's something that can be broadcast everywhere and bring some negative energy to maybe the initiatives that you're trying to undertake. So, how do you fail within a safe environment?
Well, I think first you gotta properly size the object we're talking about here. I don't think anybody on this any of the commentators here are saying we should just throw something out the window that is our core system. But I think we can, as we're working on the next project, I think we can iterate through those very rapidly and be able to get some outcomes and find out they achieved what we were looking for. So I think you can rapidly prototype, rapidly fail, rapidly learn. But the most important thing that I've learned on that fail fast mentality is you got to make sure that you learn, and you have to make sure that when you fail that you stop. And because sometimes in business and also in government that you start these things and they just take on a life of their own. I guess my old boss used to talk about them as zombies in a zombie movie. They would just never die. They would keep popping up, and those zombies take resources. And if you have too many zombies roaming around, next thing you know, have a bunch of things that are not strategic that are consuming resources. So we need to size up these opportunities, make sure that we actually have a start and an end, what we're trying to get from them, make sure we learn from them, apply those learnings to the next thing we do so we can iterate through and actually get a better outcome. But we have to make sure that we learn and stop what we're doing from the first failure, apply those resources to the next thing, learn from that, apply, stop, look, learn, do the next thing. So I think you can fail in government and you can fail rapidly. We've done that many times here as we're learning about the right way to do things. And they talk about the quotes from Edison, right? He failed 10,000 times on ways to make the light bulb before he finally figured out the way that it worked. And well, we hope it doesn't take 10,000 times, but sometimes it does take a whole bunch of attempts to be able to figure things out. And we should be able to do that. But you would never do that on, in my case, our core system. We would never say, well, let's just see what happens with vehicle registration and put $7 billion of revenue at risk. You would never start there.
There's a lot of good examples that we see happening within the state services for sure. And even this program, as we get into this beta test phase and mentality of going into the mix, we see those examples and we can learn from them and also recognize that they're being successful in a number of different ways. Joe, how do you lead through all those iterations as you're trying out new things before you get to the final product?
Well, for me, one of the things that I always go to is I go to the end and kind of come backwards from that, right? But when I talk about going to the end, it's not the end of the project at hand. It's the end of why we exist, each of us. Steve at DMD, us here at the Department of Rehabilitation, we all have a purpose for why we exist. And so for me, it's always anchoring everything that we are trying, everything that we're doing, in improving that outcome that we're all tasked with, right? So if you anchor there, you have a lot more flexibility than you do otherwise. So that's one principle that I apply. The other one is that a lot of times we talk about change management and it's needed. And then we talk about organizational change. But the thing that I often say to folks is when people believe in the change, get out of the way. They're going to be really innovative. They're going to be good at it. They're going to make it happen. When they don't believe in what they're doing, we need a lot of project plans. And we need a lot of, okay, If you have done A, now do B. So as leaders, one of the things that we have the responsibility to do is make that case up front. Why are we doing this? And how does it impact our outcome, the reason that we exist? Because when you have that kind of buy-in, right, then you have people that are vested and invested, and they will find ways, good ways for things to happen, right? And I don't think we do enough of that, frankly. I don't think we do enough investment of time up front on the why. Why are we doing this? How does it change the experience? How does it change the outcome for the people that we're serving? And at the end of the day, folks, every single one of us, I don't care where you are and what you're doing, you're serving Californians. We are providing a service they need to conduct their everyday lives, right? So anchoring it in that way, I think, is one of the best ways that I found to navigate through these times.
John, we talked about three broad areas around technology, around this idea of outcomes, working with colleagues or within systems. There's one other area that I want to get to before opening up the conversation, maybe more broadly, and that's around the individual. And what's the role of the individual as we think about this idea of innovation? So what's my role?
Yeah, role clarity, always an important thing to understand, what it is that I'm supposed to do, when it comes to innovation and change. And I talked earlier about, really scanning the environment, understanding what your role is, what you need to be doing. If a leader, and we can all, think about this. It says, hey, I need you all to go north. And if I were to ask you, Paul, which way is north from where you're sitting right now? You might point in a very specific direction that might be true or not true. But I think we'll come up with all very different, answers to that question and be very, very different in the fact of how many degrees we are from true north. So I think, it's that conversation, that communication between us in our particular role, knowing what we need to be doing, what our marching orders are, and being clear and concise and doing constant check-ins with each other on what that looks like, so that we're adjusting those marching orders to get to where we need, like Joe said earlier, the end in mind. We need to be in a specific spot at a specific time, or it doesn't have to be all together at one particular time, especially the way that the change curve works. But we all need to be going north, and we need to be, relatively close to each other with that end in mind. So my role is knowing where I am at all times, scanning the environment, looking for obstacles that might be in the way, and always recalibrating the direction I'm taking to get to that same end in mind. And that requires us asking questions, again, frequent touch-ins, frequent check-ins with our leadership. And for leaders, touch and go and checking in with your people and making sure that we continue to have alignment. And that requires, again, leadership consistency.
John, my wife and I were fighting the other day. She said I have zero sense of direction. So I said, fine. And I picked up my stuff and write. Oh, boo hiss, academic jokes.
Yeah,
Meredith,
nice.
you started today talking about this idea around mindset, feed into this conversation on the role itself, and what is the mindset piece all about?
Yeah, a couple things. What we've been talking about organizationally applies individually, which is the why, the individual's values and their why and their purpose, and having a sense of purpose within the organization. Again, I'm going to brag on DTSC because when we've done surveys, our staff have a great attachment to the mission of the organization. And so that we have a head start in terms of our ability to get staff engaged and moving in the right direction. But people have to have a sense of agency, right? And so, one way to control stress, for instance, is to figure out what you can control and focus on that as opposed to all the things you can't control. And so helping people find out, understand where and people need to do this for themselves, where they contribute, what they can control, and what they, asking for what they need, asking questions. I think the individual has a tremendous responsibility to ask questions. If the true north isn't clear to you and you think you might be headed north, northwest or southeast, God forbid, then ask those questions. That is a true obligation of an individual to make sure they have clarity. and to ask for that clarity over and over and over again. Because then that leads to making sure you're not going off in the wrong direction. And actually, when you ask a question like that, it probably serves the larger project or organization because somebody else likely has the question too. So I think thinking about values, asking questions, finding where your why is, and cultivating that sense of agency are really important to the individual.
Thanks for that. I want to get to some broad observations around innovation. And Steve, ask you a mean question. Whenever we think about innovation within public service, often it happens because of a crisis, whether it's a health crisis or a crisis within an organization. Is it possible to innovate without having a crisis? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think you absolutely can. I mean, it's easier with a crisis, and sometimes we even manufacture crisis. We have this thing called Real ID, the poster behind me, and that's this arbitrary date set by the federal government. So we try to rally the troops around. Look, we've got this date certain, and that date certain has moved a couple of times. But so anyway, so I think you can use existing goals and deadlines to rally troops behind, but I don't think you need hard stops. You just have to start looking at the opportunity in front of you, looking at the data in front of you, and the friction that perhaps the organization is built up to do simple tasks. And if I think about our organization, we collect fees, we collect taxes, and we give people pieces of paper, a sticker for your plate. So not a great value exchange at some level. So we should be super efficient at doing that. And we start thinking about and talk about, these are our friends, our neighbors, our family. And we start having people's mindset change a little bit. It's like, look, so how do we do that efficiently and effectively so that we're just making sure that, that service can be delivered very efficiently. And I think we just do that sort of lather, rinse, repeat, and we use data to kind of inform us. And we also try to use examples, whether it's at Amazon or pizza delivery or some other service. I think, we're surrounded by these other services. And I think we can use them as examples to drive some urgency to be able to update our progress. Now, we have to have some successes, right? I think for the people that have run large projects, you're going to have a whole bunch of little successes because people are going to go from I can't to well, maybe. And I like to think, I know I've got some DMV staffers on this call, but I think we've gone from we can't do it, it's a statute, it's a regulation, no, can't do it, to like, well, I guess we can. And we've proven time and time again that we can actually have these iterative successes. Now people are now starting to lean in thinking, well, dang, we can. So let's do it. And I think we're going to build on both the crises to be able to drive major initiatives, work from home, whatever it might be, to also, looking at things that just help our friends and neighbors, pay their taxes, pay their fees, and get, their indicia, as we call it, those stickers or plates we might send out to people. And, that's really our job, is to help drive those initiatives so we can do it, crisis or not.
Stephanie, when Steve was describing that, I'm popping up with two metaphors, and no, John, it's not the race car metaphor. It's a metaphor of being able to lead from the balcony, that being you're watching a dance. Another metaphor that's commonly used is seeing the forest from the trees. How do you get into this space where you're able to see this larger picture of what's happening and also recognizing that there's a lot of little details that also need to take place? How do you go about doing that?
Sure. So it was making me think about a couple things. I think when we're talking about the individuals, like Meredith was saying, absolutely, we need to make sure that they understand their why. And as Steve was saying, absolutely, it can be done. We don't have to innovate just in reaction to a crisis. And so specifically, Paul, to your point, when we're talking about, okay, how can we make sure we're seeing the forest for the trees? And I get that it's incredibly hard, right? It's incredibly hard to kind of pick up your head and say, where exactly are we going and why? And that has to do with a shared vision. And I know that that's talked about a lot in these sessions, but it is so critical. And the shared vision can be coupled with, just like Steve said, models of success. And I think that's so critical, of course, as we continue to have the discussions and the team meetings, and as we continue to make sure that, frankly, middle management understands very clearly about where the organization and the agency is going. We must have that shared vision. We must have models of success. And definitely, as someone mentioned in the chat, we have to celebrate those successes, right? That starts to foster, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to it, but it starts to foster that culture. It also starts to foster a culture of not only being innovative, but being less fearful of course failure, and also being able to ask those questions because people can feel the momentum of where the agency or the organization is going. So I think having that shared vision is critical. And of course, complementary to that, of course, is clear communication. And I would even say over communication. I think that given where we are today, not just in telework, but because we are looking to move the needle and we are looking to do things very differently for the state of California, it is imperative to over communicate, because sometimes I think, especially in telework, we don't communicate enough.
And communication is always there. And that's something, John, that you'll recognize of always in this training space. Everyone wants trained on communication, but doesn't always come easily to even know where to get started with it. Joe, I want to take a different angle in this idea around communication and frame it around some comments that coming up on the chat feature, including the last one from Crystal about roadblocks. And what do you do with roadblocks when they start to show up as you're trying to innovate? How have you thought about that in the work that you do?
Yeah, we can't anticipate everything, but we have to know that, as we are moving forward and in a certain direction, that things will get in our way. They will be roadblocks. And knowing that fact that not everything's going to be smooth, we can, be ready or resilient for when those roadblocks come, and be prepared to take routes around them, or in some cases, drive right through them. You talked a little bit about, communication, partnership between the departments, and I think, what's always been the case, pre-COVID, it's just a part of, working in, I guess, a large body type organization like the state, a lot of different departments, and Paul, to use your word, silos of excellence out there. It's being able to navigate through, what are our common problems? What do we have, that we're working on together? It's extremely difficult to shout a message in any one of our seats, Steve's seat, Joe's seat, Meredith's seat, a message out to all departments. Okay, I know this because I've been a part of several efforts that require state departments to take information and then do something with that information. Quite the effort. So here's the thing, Cal HR department I'm in, small department, with a very mighty mission of leading HR policy for state departments. We have the ability to shape policy, for the entire state, no small task. So when someone talks about the impact of increased communication, partnership between staff and departments, the roadblocks that come to effective communication, I think, once we identify what those are and how we can work around them, we can see that, there's a lot of us that are trying to solve very similar problems for our own departments, our own area, but that communication, that increased partnership and collaboration can really help us get through those types of obstacles in a much more efficient way.
Joe, how do we put ourselves in a mindset to be able to recognize that there's going to be roadblocks and that it can be overcome?
Hey, Paul, can I just throw a piece in here on these roadblocks? So, if I think about the folks that are sitting on this call, they're probably sitting at all levels of an organization, and the roadblock is going to look different for different people, depending on where you're sitting in the organization. But a couple of things that I think are true across any scale is find champions and leverage partnerships, right? So sometimes that roadblock can easily be removed by someone who may not be in that immediate circle that you're working in, right? And sometimes if you just have a real champion on the front end of something, they can make things get the heck out of the way, right? So part of this is find that right person to champion that project that you're doing, and find the partnerships and build that support across the systems, because those barriers are not coming out of thin air. They're coming from another system. They're coming from within your system. They're coming from within some structure, and somebody can influence that. If you know who that person is, bring them on board.
Meredith, throughout your career, you have assumed different roles within public service. A lot of it's focused within the space that you're working now, but there's been a direct progression as you've gone up to become a director. When Joe's talking about these ideas around champions, how have you identified them at different levels as you're climbing that career ladder, if you will?
That's a great question. And I wouldn't have the career that I have now because I did do that pivot that Stephanie did from the private sector. And that wouldn't have been possible if there hadn't been champions along the way. And a lot of it is, somebody you hear say something that resonates with you, you think you're on the same page, reaching out to them, building that network. So you have some sounding boards and you have kind of a baseline of champions who are in your corner that can help you think things through. But I do believe that having champions clearly identified, especially I come from a very much a project management mindset and approach to things. As you describe, design projects and identify the roles and responsibilities, identifying that project champion is critical. It's no less important than the project manager or, somebody who has a particular role on the team. And so I think identifying somebody who has some skin in the game or who really recognizes the problem at hand can really help make sure that you have a champion who's invested in what you're trying to do, aligned, and will be there to remove those obstacles as they come up.
Steve, I see your head nodding. How has that changed depending on where you are within your organizational structure?
I'm probably like some of the other people here. I'm relatively new, so I'm learning who those champions are. I mean, as Joe was mentioning, there are these people that they have these networks and they know how that team or that group or that tribe works. And my job is, it's been hard, but I mean, but we have a lot of really great people here. That the DMV is we have a lot of very long tenured staff, so they know, oh yeah, so and so. If I talk to so and so, they're going to move this roadblock that I think Joe was talking about. And so my job is to try to find those. It's been sometimes challenging, but I think it's very important for us as leaders to try to find those. And where you can't find those, I think we have to challenge the status quo, which is something we talked about at the outset of this call. And in my case, I know again some of my staff are on here. I'm asking, show me the statute, show me the regulations, show me where that thing is proven to have some sort of efficacy for its design purpose, and then challenge some of those assumptions in some cases. So I think where you can't find that champion, you're going to have to build the champion, and you're going to have to arm them with the tools and the approaches. And then I think, as Stephanie said a while back, you're going to have to stand with them. And if it fails, it's you failing. You're going to have to take responsibility. And I'll give you, for instance, we made a change. It seems simple to us. It's like we had an exam. It was in Russian that it gets used maybe a half dozen times a year. So we said we're just not going to provision that exam out to the field. There was an uproar. It wasn't tied to real people using the exam, but it was just the thought of something being taken away. And it wasn't the team that made the decision. I made the decision with my team. And when I got called from various levels of the governor's office, I said, yes, that was me. Yep, I got called for the first time in my career. That was a boneheaded move. So he essentially called my secretary called me a bonehead, which may technically be true, but it was one of the things that I had to stand up and say, yep, that was my decision. It wasn't anybody else's decision. I made the decision. We used data. It was the wrong thing. We reversed it. And again, that was another fail fast. We tried it, didn't work, fail fast, put the exam back out there. We proved to the team that it's okay to try stuff, and that I'm going to stand with them. In this case, I'm going to stand in front of them. So I think you can do. And there were several answers in there, Paul, but I think you can find those champions. And then, of course, you got to do, as Stephanie said, you got to be able to take the heat. You got to show that you will stand up for the team when you're making these, what seemingly should have been a simple decision that proved to be challenging. You can't shirk from that. You can't go on vacation for a week.
That was a really good example on a lot of different fronts, and I want to dive into it. But Steve, we'll have to go out for coffee as I quiz you some more around the personal responsibility and how do you test it out and just implement those systems. I want to ask one question to all of you as we want to be sensitive to time. And Stephanie, I'm going to start with you, and it's the same question for each one of you. And if you could bring out your crystal ball and see the future of innovation, what does the future of innovation look like as it's tied to public service? Stephanie.
Wow, that's a big question, but a great question at that. I will say, so again, I'm in the legislative branch now, and so I'm looking at public service, a little bit more holistically on both sides and about how we can collaborate more tightly. So the future of collaboration and innovation and public service is just that in my mind. And I literally was thinking about this the other day, right? As the legislature is putting forth bills, and we're in session for this 2-year bill cycle, and we're looking at, because our district offices are on the front lines of what constituents want, right? They're understanding and hearing all the complaints. They're getting all of the feedback and the letters and the calls. But as we're developing that, are we working very closely with the executive branch, and given all the great work that you guys do in agency, to be really understanding about the capacity that you have, right? Are you oversubscribed? Where are you going within your agencies? So I think just tighter communication and integration between even these two branches would be more helpful. And that might not sound like innovation, but trust me, it's innovation. I think the second component that I would think about, that I have been thinking about as well, is how do we make it easier for the citizens and the constituents to be able to be more civically engaged, right? How do we make sure that they are able to give feedback to ourselves so that we continue to course correct, so that we continue to know that this shared vision that we have, so that we know where we're innovating, whether it be Steve's great work around BMV, whether it be Meredith, how do we know that we're moving in the right direction and that it's not 5 years later that we're pivoting too late? So it's really those two things, Paul, in summary, that I see about public sector working more closely as a whole, and of course, making it easier for our constituents to be civically engaged.
Thanks, Stephanie. John, same question, future of innovation.
All right, I'm going to look into this crystal ball in my little world compared to everybody else here. But, I really think in some of the conversations that we've had with government operations, Office of Digital Innovation, and even some players on a national level with multi-state innovation task force led by New Jersey. I'm going to have to say data transparency. Access to information, on the work that we do, the results, what we produce, being available more publicly. So more access to, all of those inner workings on what makes us tick and how we measure success within our organization. I really think, and there has been a concerted effort, and DMV, there's a number of departments that do really great work in that particular way and share that with their customers. You can go back to DMV. I think about they've been tracking wait list or times with their customers coming in. And now they share that data with their customers directly. And I think it's just a fantastic tool, but that's just a small example on something that I really think is going to be helpful for the state, because when we have more access and clarity to data, to information, to results, and how we're moving the needle up or we're moving in a certain direction, I think we'll get more collaboration, communication on how we can just do a better job collectively in that way. And our people will grow because of that.
Excellent. Steve, future of innovation.
Well, I think it's strong. I mean, it's really up to all the people in the session, all the employees of the state, and I think it's okay for our constituents as they weigh in. So I think that, look, I think the future is very, very bright for the state. I think we have to make sure that we're not afraid to try things. And as I said before, as my friend in Brawley will remind me, never underestimate your customers. And I think if we keep that in mind, and then we have data and we say, look, is that working? Is it not working? Am I attacking the right problems? I think we have a lot of really great opportunities in front of us, but we have to keep leaning in. We can't be afraid of the one 89-year-old grandmother in whatever city. As much as we want to help her, we can't slow down for her. We have to make sure we have a solution for her, but we need to make sure that, in fact, we have the solution that will, lead in this next generation of our customers. So we have to be able to do both, but we can't, wait forever to be able to innovate. So I think our opportunities are very, very strong, and I'm very, very hopeful. And that's why I joined the government. I've been very pleased with how our team and how the state has responded to us.
Excellent. Joe, future of innovation.
I'm going to put a little bit of a different lens on this. The impact of innovation. A person-centered, whole person approach, because every single person that we serve crosses so many systems, So the future of innovation means that individual is getting services that are meaningful to them in a way that addresses their whole person need. And in the innovation that we'll have and will undertake, we'll make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind in doing that, right? So whole person, person-centered, and leave no one behind is where innovation needs to end up.
Thanks, Joe. And last word, Meredith, the future of innovation. What is it?
Bringing up the rear, running the anchor leg. Well, I'm going to go back to John because John mentioned data, and I think data is the future for us in terms of innovation, whether that's us establishing better metrics so that we know, again, as John said, whether or not we're moving the needle. That tells us where we need to innovate. It gives us the information we need. But beyond just being more metrics driven and making it easier for legislators and our other stakeholders to hold us accountable because we're working to establish metrics, I think data really is it's kind of a microcosm of some of the challenges we have. So we, for instance, want to be more data driven. When we look at the staff that are coming out of school these days, out of the universities, the community colleges, they are very data savvy. And we don't necessarily have what we need to take advantage of that in terms of how we innovate, whether that's our duty statements that don't anticipate that. Try to hire a data scientist. Tell me what classification to use. It's really hard. And so that brings me to just a general big overarching thing that I think has to happen in government. And I think it can happen in government, which is democratization of certain skill sets in our workforce, not being quite as black and white in terms of this expertise lies here and this expertise lies there. Just the borders are going to get grayer and mushier, and we have to be able to accommodate that because that's actually going to be very fertile ground for new collaborations, for new ways of partnering within our organizations and outside our organizations. And we all know that more diverse teams and bringing more diverse perspectives to problems leads to more creative, more innovative solutions. So anticipating that and making sure that our structures allow for that, I think is really critical.
Well, what a great conversation today. If you have the ability to turn on your cameras, turn on your cameras. Come on, turn them on, or I'll tell you some bad dad jokes. Oh, here they come. They don't want to hear the bad dad jokes. All right, get your hands up. Clap with your neighbors. Thanks, Steve Gordon, Meredith Williams, Joe Xavier, Stephanie Tom, and John Sandberg. What a rich conversation today. And certainly this wouldn't be possible with one other person to thank. When you Google the word innovation, her picture always pops up. Please help me thank Rebecca Christensen for putting on this forum as well. Get your hands up. Thanks, Becca.